There's one last environment variable that we have to set up, the PG password. This environment variable is a password that's going to be used to get access to our database. Now, one thing I want to be really clear about right now is that the password is tied to Postgres itself. This is not a password related to Docker or Kubernetes or anything like that. We are talking about just getting access to Postgres. We need to make sure that we add in this environment variable and pass it to the multi-server. But like I said in the last video, chances are that we do not want to write out our password in plain text and store it inside of our config file. So rather than adding in our password as plain text or anything like that, we're going to use a new type of object inside of Kubernetes that we have not yet discussed. So the new type of object we're going to use is something called a secret. So it's a very similar type of object in the sense that we had previously created a pod, a deployment, a service, and so on. The purpose of a secret is to securely store one or more pieces of information inside of your cluster. So a good example of a use of a secret would be for a database password, an API key, or maybe an SSH key, or any similar type of secret piece of information that you do not want to have easily exposed to the outside world, but you do want to make available to run in containers inside of your application. And so our database password perfectly qualifies as something that we would want to store inside a secret. Now, the secret is only about information that you want to very much protect. So in our example of our environment variables here, storing the Redis host right here would have not been a very good use of a secret, because the Redis host is always going to be the name of our service. And the name of our service is very plainly legible and readable inside of our Redis cluster IP file right here. So not a good reason to try to store the Redis host, for example, inside of a secret. Probably the same thing for the port. Now, maybe the PG user would be something to store inside of a secret. Maybe the PG database would be as well. But for our example here, we're just going to worry about encoding our PG password and storing it inside of a secret. All right, so how do we create a secret? Well, a secret is an object, very much like a pod, a deployment, a service. And so we have said a billion times throughout this course that we always create an object through the use of a config file. However, you and I are not going to use a config file to create a secret. Instead, we are going to run an imperative command that's going to create the secret for us. So why are we using an imperative command here as opposed to a config file? Well, when you create the secret, you have to provide the data that you want to encode. And so if we had to write out a config file that said, hey, here's our secret, like in plain text, here's the PG password, then it would kind of defeat the purpose of having a secret anyways. So we're going to create our secret with a single command that's going to be imperative in nature. And that means that we're going to have to run this command locally on our computer to create the secret. It also means that when we eventually take our application to a production